Well, our political editor, Christopher Hope, managed to finally get Nigel Farage to just sit still in one place for a little bit, and he cornered him for 5 minutes and asked him a whole host of questions, and we have very gratefully been able to get that turned around for the start of this show. So that's quite enough for me from now. It is time for me to throw you over to the main men, our political editor, Christopher Hope, and the one and only Nigel Farage.
Farage, the biggest cheer that happened in your speech there was at the end when you said you don't care about skin colour, orientation, we care if you share the values of this country, we judge you as a person. Why do you have to say that?
Because we're sick to death of being divided up. We're sick to death of our kids at school at young ages, if they're white, being told they're oppressors, if they're black, being told they're victims. This whole division in society, the equality, diversity and inclusion agenda, which now discriminates against majority groups in workplaces or joining the Royal Air Force or whatever it may be. We hate that. We don't believe they're consistent with British values in any way at all. And the reason I got the biggest cheer for that is you can see what a thoroughly decent, open group of people these are.
Do you worry that that language might be seized on, you mentioned skin colour and orientation, by people who think that you are, you'll say you're not, but a far-right party, a racist party?
I'm sorry, you've just contradicted yourself in the most extraordinary way. If that got the biggest cheer, how on earth can we be far-right? How on earth can we be far-right?
Earlier, Lee Anderson talked about feeling like our culture, get out. What culture does he mean? Is that a white culture? Or what
culture? I mean, and Middleton talked a lot about this. You know, it's about our history that shaped us in the way that it has. And whilst it may not be perfect, it's something we're proud of. It's about the democracy that we've built. It's about the universal values that we share. It's about understanding that it is the Judeo-Christian culture that underpins everything that we stand for. It's not difficult, this.
Critics see it, though, as being excluding groups, but it's not in your world.
It's the opposite. It's the opposite. No. It's the DEI culture that excludes various groups and says, oh, you must employ this person over that person because they're X, Y or Z. We're against all of that.
You said the sky's the limit. Zia Yusuf, who's your chairman, he's told us on GB News that you can win 2 terms. Not 1 term, 2 terms in the 2030s.
He does run away a bit, doesn't he?
Is this even possible? But from where you were a colleague at GB News before the election, you thought you'd go back into Reform UK, you won 5 seats. I mean, do you really win 321 seats to give you the majority in the House of Commons you need?
I've never lived through a moment in my life where absolute disappointment and dissolution with the 2 parties. People are uninspired in every way. They vote for one because they can't stand the other and vice versa. I mean, even this massive Labour majority hasn't come with any love. So if ever there was a moment when something big and historic was going to happen, it's now. Now look, is it probable? No. But you asked me a different question. Is it possible? Anything's possible.
What are the odds then? You're a betting man.
8 to 1 at the moment.
And you put money on 8 to 1.
Well, that's what the bookies say. That's what the bookies say.
But can you really be a PM? I mean, have you got all the qualities you need to do it? I mean, you've run, I suppose.
Well, no, I haven't really. I've not been to Oxford. I've run a private business. I have a sense of humour. I'm probably disqualified. But look, Chris, you know, point is, in the next 5 years, it's probable that somebody younger and better looking than me will come along. And if that's...
So it may not be you taking the next action.
No, but if I can help propel us in that direction, and if nobody does come along that's better, then I'll have a go.
And your new constitution means that members can vote out if they're like...
Well, the new constitution fundamentally changes the shape of the party. You know, it was set up as a company that I owned. I did it and I explained to the audience why, to stop us being taken over by malign actors. I mean, and believe you me, the far right, the genuine far right, would have come and tried to take it over. And now's the time, this party's come of age, to give it to the members.
How do you do it without data? At this party, this hall is on a sugar rush of that excitement from July, no question. But how do you get past that? You won with a divided, exhausted Tory party against you. They will be organised, you know they'll be organised in 2028, 2029. How do you beat them?
By organising. You know, I mean, what is this conference is all about saying to them, I made it very clear in my talk, you know, we will succeed and fail, not on what I do, on what you do. There's only so much you can do with air war. You know, you can put out big national messages, you can talk to you can do social media, you can do all those things, but ultimately, it is on the door. That it really matters. And the Lib Dems have proved that, I think quite remarkably.
So the staging posts towards you becoming Prime Minister are what? How many seats winning next May at the local election?
We'd need to win several hundred seats next May. We really would.
And then the Welsh Assembly election?
Go into Wales, Scotland and all the rest of it.
Again, dozens in each of those seats?
We'd need to, I think dozens in Scotland at this stage would be a bit bullish.
It takes time. It took time for you to win the Brexit battle, didn't it? It will take time, this, perhaps more than...
Do you know, the Brexit battle was harder than this is going to be. This is about the desire for something different, a feeling that we've failed, that the country's not working, and yet, despite thinking those things, look at the optimism of our people. They genuinely think something can happen.
And just finally, who's your inspiration? Is Donald Trump giving any advice?
I did speak to him on Monday after the second
of course,
assassination attempt. He always encourages me.
What's his key bit of advice for you?
Be me.
Be you. Nigel Farage, thank you for joining us today on GB News. Thank you.
OK, so that was our political editor, Christopher Hope, there, with Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK. I'm going to bring my panel into this now. Susanna, I'll start with you. One of the first things there was about diversity, inclusion, etc., followed by another question, which was something Lee Anderson had raised at the conference here, which is, and I'm paraphrasing here, which is essentially, if you don't like Britain, you know where the airport is. Is that fair enough, do you think?
Well, one of the things that Nigel Farage has always said, one of his mantras is, we want our country back. And that is a line that's peppered through his speeches for as long as I've known him. And this is also a phrase that I hear very often when people are talking. They say, we do want our country back. They recognise that Britain has changed. We had Labour since 1997, which deliberately allowed mass uncontrolled immigration. They said at the time to rub the nose of the right in diversity. They wanted to change the way our country looked. He also mentioned equality, diversion and inclusion. Now, in my view, when I was at school, say many, many years ago, I didn't feel that our country was racist in any shape or form. I think things have definitely changed from the 50s and 60s when you first had new immigrants. But since diversity, equality, inclusion has come in, he's absolutely right in what he said. Everybody's become much more divided. Everyone's wandering around on eggshells, frightened of upsetting anybody, frightened of saying something wrong. So he's right about that. And the face of the country has changed. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, Patrick,
and it makes it much less cohesive.
You cracking town. You look like a man who definitely does know where the airport is. But you've decided to come back, so that's great. Do you think it's fair enough to just say, basically, look, if you don't like it here, stop trying to subvert British culture. You can leave if you want. Otherwise, just get on board with it.
I think that's a perfectly fair thing to say, but it's not really a policy, is it? So Lee Anderson has got a bit of a talent for saying these things, and he did when he was in the Tories. But the challenge for Reform is to come up with some considered policies which could, are they going to deport people who came illegally or people who came and then committed certain criminal offences? What's the plan to do that? What is the immigration policy looking ahead? But I think it's a very hot-button issue at the moment. That every single identity group is encouraged to wallow in victimhood, to try and get one over the others, apart from white working class people, right? And they're not allowed to say, well, actually, our teenage daughters are running the gauntlet here, or working class boys are not getting into university. That's an invisible issue, particularly, I think, under this sort of North London Labour government. And, Robert Jenrick's got a sense of this in his head, hasn't he? But Nigel Farage, Lee Anderson kind of own the anti-woke thing, and they're wise not to let it go. OK,
Matthew, I'll bring you in on that. Do you think that there's some truth to that? That what Nigel Farage is saying there is owning the anti-woke thing? And him and Robert Jenrick talking both really about being proud to be English. The other thing I thought I saw you shaking your head a bit at during that VT there was about this notion that he could win in 2029. So do you find that ridiculous?
No, basically he was talking, the bit I was shaking my head at is he thinks that somebody younger and fresher may end up coming along before him. And I think because of Nigel's charisma, whatever people think of him, the party will die a death when he's finished. I don't see anybody at the moment that can fill that vacuum that he would leave, and it'd be a big vacuum.
Yeah, no, fair enough. On the actual substance of some of the things that he was saying then, when it comes to, people being taught that they're a victim or anything along those lines, do you think that he's talking people's language there? Should the Labour Party be fearful of him saying things like that?
I think the party should be fearful of Nigel, and if they're not, they're daft to consider him as not a threat. I mean, I went to school, a little bit more recently than Susanna. I never got told who was victims and who weren't, or whether people were racist, or told about how awful the country was. I'm proud to be British. I see the world in a very different way from Nigel, but I've never seen the almost myths that seem to perpetuate much of public life that were dividing people. And actually, Nigel's divided a lot of the country in his own way as well. So it's a bit of reap what you sow at times.
Mm. Do you think that Nigel could go and be Prime Minister in 2029? I mean, that was probably the other really big line that came out of it today, I think, which was that they are saying openly, we are preparing for victory at the next general election.
OK, number one rule of politics, never admit that you might not win. That's absolutely something you're not allowed to do in politics. So personally, I think being Prime Minister in 4 or 5 years' time is a little bit ambitious, but I would love to see Nigel Farage as the leader of the opposition then at the dispatch box, because he would be absolutely brilliant. And then I think he'd certainly have a chance at the next election after that if he still wants to do it, if he says someone younger and prettier hasn't come along or whatever it might be. But yeah, I think they've got to be so careful, though. Reform has still got a long way to be professional. When I joined UKIP in 2013, I was really quite shocked, having been in the Conservative Party, just how so far away that party was from being anything like remotely professional. And in a sense, Reform is the continuation of that legacy. So I really, really want Reform to do well. And my message is, please don't mess it up, because the country needs you.
He made a big point during his speech today of saying that one of the big things that they're going to do from now on is absolutely vet every single candidate. You can tell that for Nigel, the worst case scenario would be standing at local elections or there's general election or whatever, and it turns out that some absolute complete and utter nut job with a track record of goodness knows what has managed to wander his way or her way into the party. And so there is this desire now to try to professionalise it, isn't there? And there was a rallying call for everyone in that hall, which did look incredibly full, I must say, to try to play their part themselves. So do you think he might be successful in that, or is he always going to succumb to the odd nutter?
Well, I think there'll always be the odd so-called nutter, and in fact, most of the parties have them. But Nigel parties tend to get more scrutiny because it's a way for both the left and the right to try and keep him down. I actually think the public, despite Reform's problems with selecting so many candidates so quickly at the election, I think the public is kind of in the share price a bit, and the idea that Nigel is an extremist, I think he showed with Brexit he actually was in line with the majority of the country, and I think personally that's faded away a bit.
He's got the charisma, he's got things that frankly Keir Starmer doesn't have. Just very, very quickly, Matthew, one of the things for you as well is Anne Widdecombe was up there. She was talking about when Labour have released all these prisoners out to the streets, some of whom miraculously have managed to find their way back into prison in the last week or so. But what she thinks should have happened was that we'd turned holiday camps into secure prison-like units, as almost like halfway houses. It's things like that I know might sound a bit silly, but I think that would resonate quite well on the doorstep if they actually did them. Is it that kind of policy thing that Labour's missing out on?
If anybody that's ever stayed at Butlins thinks it's maybe a prison camp anyway, so it wouldn't make much of a difference. Sorry to Butlins. No, I think...
All prisons, I suppose.
Well, quite, yeah. No, I think people may like that. We have a country that believes in being very tough on crime. And actually, New Labour did that. They were in talks about opening up ships to put overspills of prisons on, which I wouldn't, think is a good idea. But there's a narrative there, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. But, certainly the way things go for Keir Starmer, and we're going to be talking about that later on.